Hey, what's happening, guys? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today I want to start to talk a little bit about Nintendo's 2025 and why I think we might be seeing some of their biggest and best and some of our favorite franchises all showing up in the same year next year. Of course, a huge part of this is just my own speculation. A lot of it is what I like to consider educated guessing. And then part of it is also essentially confirmed fact because we do have a target year release for one of these big games that we're going to talk about. And what's really exciting is something that helps facilitate this conversation. An idea for me is the fact that we know new hardware is coming from Nintendo. They're going to be revealing the Switch 2 sometime soon, hopefully before the end of the year. There's a great reason to think that their next generation will start in 2025. And because I think new hardware will release in 2025, that just adds more fuel to this fire that we might be seeing a couple of these big franchises all get a release in 2025. So I'm just going to cut to brass tacks at this point and let you know that we're talking about Mario, we're talking about Zelda, and we're talking about my favorite franchise, Metroid, because I do think next year in 2025, we're very likely looking at a scenario where all three of those franchises get some kind of a release, maybe not all brand new releases, but some kind of release, significant games, stuff that we'd be excited to play, all happening in 2025. Whether it's for the current Switch generation, whether it's for the next generation, whether some of these might be releasing on both, or of course, if backwards compatibility is part of the conversation, maybe that factors into it as well. It's extremely exciting. I think we're looking at a very high chance that all three of these franchises get a release next year, and I can't wait to talk about it. One thing I do just want to say and remind you guys of, I've been doing this YouTube thing for a long time, over 10 years, something I would like to do either before the end of this year or maybe in the first half of next year, would be to finally cross the 30,000 subscriber threshold. So if you like what I'm doing, if you're new to this channel and not subscribed, then I hope you consider subscribing to help me cross that milestone. So let's start off with the most known quantity and also my favorite part of this conversation, which is Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. We know about this game. We've actually seen this game. The 7-year wait finally came to an end over this past summer in June when Nintendo finally pulled the veil off of this game and confirmed to us that it still existed, which I always knew and never doubted, but some people did start to doubt that Metroid Prime 4 was even still in development simply because of the long silence. I always thought that was crazy. I always called it out as a crazy thought, but it was something that people did believe. However, we did now see what this game looks like. We know it's in development. It blew us away. It blew me away, that's for sure, exceeding my expectations. And one of the few things we can say for sure about the game is that it is currently targeting a 2025 release. Of course, we all know at the end of that incredible mind-blowing trailer, it tells us 2025. Now, I have theorized a little that there's always that possibility that the game slips to 2026. They didn't give us a confirmed hard date. They just said it's targeting 2025. And we have seen games like this, from Nintendo included, slip or move around a little bit, so it's something we have to be aware of. However, as I've also discussed, I do think that we might be looking at a situation where Nintendo revealed it in June for the current Switch because they knew they needed to finally show us this game and give us some glimmer of hope about finally being able to play it. But I think that that was more just to get it out there, and that the next time they address us about the game, it's going to be because, and this is my speculation only, that it'll be because they're now showing us the Switch 2 version, or they're tying the future marketing, future gameplay, and even confirmed release date information surrounding the Switch 2. They need the Switch 2 to have been announced and revealed, and we've all seen it. We all know when we can buy and play the Switch 2, and if Metroid Prime 4 will be playable on the Switch 2 via either backwards compatibility or like a next-gen definitive edition release or whatever that might look like, that they want to be able to discuss it from the perspective of the Switch 2. And so they were willing to give us the 2025 year for the Switch version, but once we start seeing it running on the Switch 2, they might be able to tell us a hard date, and that I think that will also be 2025. So, while I do still think it's mysterious enough that maybe it slips into 2026, I more want to optimistically believe that they're waiting to give us the hard 2025 release date until after we've seen the Switch 2. And so what about Mario? What's going on with Mario, and why do I think we're going to see a new Mario game next year? And that one's pretty easy. Plenty of people have discussed it. This is not unique to me. And it's because if the Switch 2, if a next generation does start next year in 2025, I find it hard to believe that a brand new 3D Mario epic adventure won't be a part of it. If anything, it's either going to be a launch day game, like their premier launch day title, or it's going to be something that releases, in my opinion, very soon after the launch. Something a lot of people have discussed, something I have discussed, is that between Metroid Prime 4 and a new 3D Mario, I think those two games will be the, first 6-month, bangers, right? So one of those games I think will be a premier launch title. The other one will release just a few months after the launch, so that we all have something very exciting to look forward to soon after buying our launch day Switch 2s, right? And so I've discussed it at length before in a video. There's a case to be made for both. Is Metroid Prime 4 the better launch title? Is Mario the better launch title? Which one is better served as a secondary title several months after the Switch 2 releases? All of these things, there's a case to be made for both, and maybe you lean one way or another, and that's fine. The point is, I do think around the launch of the next generation, in 2025, we will see a new Mario game. Of course, we can go back to the 2D or 3D part of the conversation. Is it going to be a new 3D Mario game like most of us think? Let me say this. Here's the reason I do think it will be a new 3D game, and it's because we just got the new 2D game. Mario Wonder released less than a year ago. I guess you could say almost a year ago, because I believe it was October 2023. And that game blew me away, by the way. I absolutely loved it. I made a video discussing this. I actually enjoyed Mario Wonder a lot more than I enjoyed Mario Odyssey. And Odyssey's a great game. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a crazy person. I love Mario Odyssey. But I think Mario Wonder was a lot more fun and inventive, and it just worked for me a little bit better than Odyssey, even though both, of course, are great games. And so if they just released a brand new 2D Mario last year, we know they're always cranking out the next main Mario game. Yeah, we've got a ton of Mario spin-offs earlier this year, and yes, we have a new Mario Party and a new Mario and Luigi game coming out very soon for the current Switch, but none of these games are mainline entries like Mario Wonder was or Mario Odyssey before it. So now it's time for the next main 3D title, whether it's Odyssey 2, whether it's Galaxy 3, whether it's Sunshine 2, which none of us probably expect, or what's probably most likely is just a whole brand new name and a whole new idea. Whatever it is, that new 3D game, it's coming soon. It's coming for the launch of the Switch 2, and in my opinion, it's coming next year in 2025. And so that brings us to the last of these main 3-pillar franchises for Nintendo, which is The Legend of Zelda. Why would I think we're going to see Zelda sometime next year? Especially when, look, I'm recording this video the morning after the newest Zelda game has launched, Echoes of Wisdom, which I spent a few hours playing last night, and I'm really enjoying, by the way. I will make a video on that after I've gotten another couple of hours in, kind of discussing my impressions. So why in 24 hours after this newest Zelda game released would I be talking about a Zelda game next year? Well, it's certainly not going to be the next main Zelda game, whether it's a 2D game, top-down game like Echoes of Wisdom, whether it's the next 3D game, the successor to Tears of the Kingdom, which only came out a year ago as well. It's not any of those. And look, it's low-hanging fruit, but I truly think those Wind Waker and Twilight Princess ports are coming, and I think next year is the perfect time to do it. To me, giving everything going on with Metroid Prime 4, with the new 3D Mario, with the next generation looming, the current Switch generation fizzling out, sales are very slow, not a lot of brand new releases. The way I see one or both of these Zelda ports finally getting released would honestly be as a late era Switch title. I don't see these being released or marketed is like a Switch 2 release, even though, again, backwards compatibility means that we might be able to play it on the Switch 2. It's about how it's packaged. Like, what physical case is it going to come in? Is it going to come in a Switch case or a Switch 2 case? Is it going to be marketed as part of the Switch 2 lineup? Or is it going to be marketed as a Switch release that, of course, can then just also be played on your Switch 2? I don't know if that makes sense, but it probably does because I think we understand how these things can happen. The same way you can buy like Ghost of Tsushima, a PlayStation 4 game, and it's marketed as a PlayStation 4 game, but you can buy it on the PS5. You can get like a PS5 Director's Cut patch. You know, it's kind of blending the lines between the last generation release it really is, but how it's also playable on the new current generation PlayStation 5. I kind of am theorizing here and speculating that if we see Wind Waker and or Twilight Princess release next year in 2025, they will be massive Zelda releases, granted just re-releases of old games, but a huge deal. And I think they're probably going to actually be Switch titles, but something that can also be played on the Switch too. Because in theory, we can't forget this, anything that would release as a Switch 2 title would not be playable on the current Switch. But, also in theory, anything released on the Switch would be able to be played on the Switch too, right? Like, the cross-platform access of certain games going forward into the next generation will only be able to go one way, if backwards compatibility is possible, like we all kind of think it will be. It's only going to be able to go from Switch to Switch 2. You probably won't be able to go Switch 2 backwards. That's very rare. Usually a game released and targeted for a current generation isn't going to be playable on the last generation. They're going to have to make it for the last generation, but then have it playable or upgradable on the new generation. Does any of this make sense? I'm sure it probably does. We all know gaming and we understand this stuff, but it feels convoluted to explain it that way. But it's a very, very long way for me to say, I think that Wind Waker and Twilight Princess are coming. I think they are the Zelda releases for next year in 2025. And I'm predicting them as late generation Switch releases. And they're probably going to be able to also be played on the Switch too, simply because of backwards compatibility. And so all in all, this is why I think 2025 for Nintendo is really getting set up to be something special. The next generation console, that's old news. We know that it's coming. It's going to be announced soon. It's probably releasing next year. It's going to be game-changing. Metroid Prime 4, we know about that game. It's got a 2025 release. But the fact that we might also be able to see Mario and Zelda get some kind of releases in the same year alongside of new Nintendo hardware could really make it a banner year. And I know that franchises like Pokemon and Mario Kart and Smash Brothers and Animal Crossing are much bigger sellers than something like a Metroid. But partly because I'm an old school gamer who grew up on the NES, I see the three pillars of Nintendo IPs still as Mario, Zelda, and Metroid because they are the oldest running, currently running Nintendo IPs that go all the way back to the beginning of their video game journey or their console video game journey with the NES, right? There was no Pokemon or Animal Crossing or Smash Brothers games releasing on the NES, but Metroid started on the NES. Super Mario started on the NES. There was Mario Brothers in the arcade and the Atari before the NES. That's true, but look, Mario is an NES era franchise. We just know that. So Metroid and Mario started on the NES, as did The Legend of Zelda. All three of those franchises still exist today. They've carried along through all of their generations, handheld and home console. And so, yeah, other franchises sell better than Metroid. You don't have to yell that at me. I know it, but I don't care. To me, the three pillars of Nintendo, Mario, Zelda, Metroid, you'll never change my mind. And because of that, the idea that all three of those might release next year in the same year as a new Nintendo generation, it's a big deal, and I can't wait to see if it really happens this way, mostly because I'm getting to play Metroid Prime 4 Beyond next year, and that's literally the only thing I care about. So these are my thoughts. Extremely exciting. Do you guys see this playing out the same way I do? How do you feel these Zelda ports will play out if, in fact, they do release next year? Talk about it below. Of course, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to help me cross that milestone. And thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.